Hey, folk, and welcome to, I guess it's not really the Ramona Brockett show. It's just Dr. Ramona commentating. And what am I commentating on? What happened with the Marine? I believe his name is Daniel Perry. No, Daniel Penny, I think is the last name. He's a 24-year-old vet with the Marines. And Jordan Neely is the 30-year-old man who was killed. A chokehold for 15 minutes. Now, people are complaining about the fact that, they wanted the mayor to stand up and say something right away, etc., ... He can't. There's an investigation going on. He can't do that. Now, what I find really interesting is your boy up in Harlem, Reverend Al Sharpton. If anybody should have said anything, it would be Reverend Al Sharpton, and we hear nothing. And I'm going to tell you why. A couple of years ago, I really got into it with a friend of mine who's a Harvard graduate, etc. ... She's a lawyer. And I said to this person, I said, Dred Scott is still the law of the land. And this person was like, no, you're wrong. And what's so interesting is Mike Huckabee, for those of you who tuned in to Fox over the years, Mike Huckabee is a minister and a very decent man. And he does a lot of commentating, and I think he even had a show or has a show on Fox. Around 2013, 2012, he said this, and I quote, Dred Scott is still the law of the land. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, and by the way, I have a little whiteboard here. I keep all my little notes for things on this whiteboard. Dred Scott was a case where you had a black man, Dred Scott, who was working for his master. And in 1843, his master went above the Mason-Dixon line, okay, to work. I believe it was in Wisconsin. Because they didn't have slavery there, the slave, Dred Scott, had to be not looked at as a slave, but as an apprentice. He was there for 11 years. And he met a woman, they got married, they had a baby. Their baby was born free, even though it wasn't 1865 yet. So the husband dies, the master dies. And back then, women were the property of their husbands or their fathers. So this case is called Dred Scott v. Sanford because the wife of the slave owner could not bring a claim in court as a woman. So her brother did. So that's who Sanford is. Long story short, in a 7-9 decision, the court ruled that no black man, no Negro, has any right or entitlement to anything that a white man has. That case has never been overturned. And all those wonderful people who you've elected as your congressmen and, your representatives have never really brought it up. And I find it curious because many of them are lawyers. So they know what this is all about, and they know the power of the words that these justices wrote. So this is a case that started in 1843 and ended in 1854, about 11 years before the proclamation. And by the mere fact that I said the proclamation, I think you should understand exactly what I think of the proclamation. It's not a law, it's a proclamation. I can proclaim that I will go to the gym 3 times a week and work on my thighs. Is that a law? No, it's merely something I proclaimed. So you're going to go proclaim that people are free, but there's not one clause anywhere that gives black folk freedom. It's going to freak people out. They're going to get mad as usual, but I'm doing this because I've gotten text messages, emails, Brockett, we miss seeing you on TV and talking about things. So I'm just going to talk about this for a minute. Not long. I'm already up to 5 minutes and 13 seconds. Not long. Another case that's never been overturned. Then I'll make my point. Where is my case? There it is. Strouder versus West Virginia. A case that was recently cited around 2009. Still the law of the land. And what was this case about? Okay. In West Virginia, they call that the high country. And below it is the low country, something I learned recently. West Virginia, they did not have blacks on their juries. Now, mind you, this case was settled in 1870, which is 5 years after the proclamation. And what was settled here? They had to determine whether a newly freed slave male could sit on a jury of his peers. What they concluded was this, and these are the words they used. These words have never been overturned. These words have never been questioned. They said this: of course a black man can sit, a newly freed slave can sit on a jury, even though they are abject, ignorant, childlike, and unfit. We here rule on the United States Supreme Court, because it went up from West Virginia. We here rule that a black man can sit on a jury. Okay. So what's my answer to all of this? Number one, as long as there are cases that have rendered the lives of blacks less than human, we will never get out of this quagmire. I thought that the 44th president, considering he's a constitutional expert, lawyer, was in Chicago, where there's tremendous strife in Chicago between blacks and Jews and others. You know, it's huge. The fight is huge. It's been going on for as long as Chicago has been in existence, you know. So since he was such a freedom fighter and everything, you know, I thought, he'll be good. He'll deal with this. But did he deal with it? No. Not at all. And what is the it that he didn't deal with? The it that he did not deal with is inequality. These cases that have come down, these laws, Barack didn't do anything. He did a lot for gays, though. He did it for the gays. And we'll talk about that another time. But not for black folk. So, what you're experiencing here is similar to that movie, 12 Years a Slave. Don't know if you saw it or read the book. Read it. There's one incredible scene where the main character has gotten in a fight with one of the overseers. And they went and hung him on a poplar tree. Now, they hung him in such a way that the tips of his toes could keep him from dying, could keep him from having his neck broken. But what was so telling in that scene was the reactions of the other black slaves. They walked right by him like nothing was happening. And then one young girl, scared to death, you could tell by her body language, went up to him, brought him some water, had him drink, and then quickly ran away. Didn't we see that on the subway? Did anybody say to that Marine, dude, you're freaking killing him, man? Are you, he's not beating anybody up. He's screaming, I need food, I need sleep, I need it, or else I'm going to die. I think that's what they said he was screaming. And that allowed this man to go up to him, put him in a chokehold for 15 minutes and kill him? Yeah, it's a homicide. Yeah. No, the mayor of New York does not need to make any comments yet. Not until they get the full investigation. It was already ruled a homicide. That's good. Sit back. Because what really needs to be worked on is citizenship. And let me say one more thing before I call it a night. I've always found it curious. And the reason I find this curious is because of what I've gone through. I am physically disabled. I have a new knee, a new hip, a new this, a new that. No one would know, because I don't go around saying ouch. But what was interesting was recently I had to speak with a human rights attorney. Now, what's so important about that? We sit and we talk when it comes to injustices with regard to blacks. We sit and we talk about civil rights, civil liberties, civil. But when we talk about gays, when we talk about those who are disabled, we talk about human rights. Civil rights versus human rights. Let's take a look at the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment says there's no slavery or indentured servitude except as a punishment for crime. So if I said to you, you can listen to 11 minutes and 53 seconds of this commentary, but after 11:53 you can't listen to it. That means that you are excluded from that. Well, if the 13th Amendment says there's no slavery or indentured servitude in the United States anymore, hey, I'd be down with it. But it says there's no more slavery or indentured servitude except as a punishment for crime. So that means that the minute you're in police custody, whether you're being arrested or not, the minute you're stopped, whether you're being arrested or not, you revert back to being a slave. And you need to look up the rights that slaves had. They did not have rights to anything on their body. Loving versus Virginia, decided in 1967. A case that Obama and his people made sure was the cornerstone for gay marriage. And let me say this, and truly, Loving versus Virginia was all about procreation because they did not want blacks and whites to procreate. Why? Because blacks were still, in Virginia at that time, considered chattel. So when this interracial couple got married, it was like the white guy was marrying his horse. They could easily throw him in jail and they could have just killed her because she's not even human. Because that's what the books say. And that's what the books still say. If the 13th Amendment says there's no slavery or indentured servitude except as a punishment for crime, that means you revert back to being a slave the minute you're in custody. Does that answer any questions about police shooting blacks left and right? Does that answer the question about why this Daniel Penny, age 24, a veteran of the war, he apparently was there, I think they said from 2010 to 2014, something like that. He served for 4 years. What made him able not to make a citizen's arrest, but to make a citizen's lynching? What gave him that power? Is it Dred Scott? Is it the fact that when we're in police custody, we turn back into chattel and slaves and we don't have the rights as a human being because it's never been taken off the books that we aren't human? It's never been taken off the books. That's why the Electoral College has so much power. Why? Because years ago, when there were like 4 million white people and like 5 or 6 million black slaves, and there was the thing between the North and the South, those people in those southern states were able to do a vote and 3/5, and they still are to this day. Does it make it a little bit more clear? So here's my question to you. And wait a minute, let me get back. Hold on. Civil rights versus human rights. Do you realize that the reason when blacks come up against racism, unfair treatment, unequal treatment, that that they have to be looked at through the eyes of civil rights, but all others who are considered human and have something go against their personage, they have human rights? Which rights are more powerful? Is it more powerful for you to be human and have a right to be human? Or is it more powerful to be looked at as 3/5 of a human and have the laws, civil liberties, dictate what you can, should, and cannot and should not have? Tell me what you think. Peace out. I don't know if this is the Ramona Brockett Show. It's thoughts from Dr. Ramona. Have a good night.